What's going on, everybody? It's Derek here back with Dog Media, and the week two breakdown and preview is upon us. We're going to be going over the Thursday night football game, how that shaked out for the Eagles and Vikings players, and also we're going to be going over the early morning games for Sunday, September 17th. Also, going to throw in my start of the week today. Hopefully, this helps y'all make some decisions and get y'all prepared for this upcoming week. Just to touch on the Thursday night football game, the Philadelphia Eagles ended up beating the Minnesota Vikings, holding on for a 34-28 point victory. Kirk Cousins doing what Kirk Cousins does best, throwing for 364 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have a fumble and he did lose in prime time. Go Eagles. Alexander Mattison, 8 carries for 28 yards and a fumble. One fumble, which was called back due to a defensive penalty. Could have had 2 fumbles on the day. Alexander Mattison is not someone that you're impressed with so far. He's probably your first or second running back, and you don't have an option to pivot away from. I would be concerned. I would be concerned. He doesn't look as explosive. I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to make a play at Kareem Hunt. I think they're going to either make a play at Kareem Hunt or look to make a trade for. Maybe they're a sleeper candidate for Jonathan Taylor. Who knows? Justin Jefferson had a big game, 11 catches for 159 yards. He did fumble out of the back of the end zone on what could have been a touchdown to give the ball to the Eagles. Jordan Addison, big play threat, 3 catches, 72 yards, and a deep bomb. TJ Hawkinson, as I mentioned, was going to gash our defense, and he had a monster game. Hopefully, I'll put him in y'all's DFS lineups or just had him in your lineups in general. He had 7 catches for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. KJ Osborne also got into the mix, putting up 3 catches for 34 yards and a touchdown. On the Eagles side of the ball, the offense was yet again disappointing. Jalen Hurts had 193 yards for 1 touchdown and an interception. He picked up the slack though, rushing in for 2 push QB sneak touchdowns at the 1 yard line, saving his fantasy day. Devontae Smith had a really big game, 4 catches, 131 yards, and a touchdown. AJ Brown was relatively quiet. You saw him getting into it with Jalen Hurts. On the sideline, Nick Sirianni had to separate them. As an Eagles fan, that's not something I want to see in a win. That's something I want to see if our team is losing and we're not getting our playmakers the ball. But when that happened, we were up by 21 points or 20 points. That's rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, seeing AJ Brown get a little bit of upset. I know he's a competitor. As a competitor myself, I get it. I know where he's coming from, but just not something you want to see in a team win. When we weren't really moving the ball well passing, we moved the ball tremendously on the ground, but AJ Brown was not a part of that, only posting 4 catches for 29 yards. Dallas Goedert was in the mix again with 6 catches for 22 yards, team lead in receptions. That's something you like. He also led the team in targets. He just didn't put up the yards, but then again, nobody really did. Devontae Smith accounted for 90% of Jalen Hurts' passing yards. So, again, you like the distribution to the 3 big playmakers. You don't like the yardage, and you don't like the way he looked while doing that. DeAndre Swift also put 3 receptions on 6 yards on what was already a monster day on the ground. Rushing, DeAndre Swift had 28 carries for 175 yards and a touchdown, averaged 6 yards per carry. Boston Scott was in the mix as well until he was taken out of the game and being evaluated for a concussion, averaging 8 yards a carry with 5 carries for 40 yards. And of course, Jalen Hurts touched the ball 12 times, didn't put up many yards, 35 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you're watching this game, you don't like how the offense looked. It's not the same explosive offense that we had last year. Nick Sirianni really needs to take over the play calling duties, I think. I'm not too pleased with the way Brian Johnson is calling the plays. There was a 3rd and 7, and we gave the ball to Jalen Hurts on a QB draw. Ended up getting, I think, 1 yard. It's not really what you want to call on a 3rd and 7. I'm not sure exactly what he was thinking. I think anybody in their right mind would know not to call a QB draw in that situation. But overall, the Eagles put together a monster day on the ground, really getting back to what they're known for, 259 team rushing yards. Look, I know I said don't start any Eagles running backs, but if you started DeAndre Swift and had no other option, you were definitely happy. I was extremely happy that they finally gave the ball to DeAndre Swift. I knew he was the best back that they had. Rashad Penny most likely might get cut or sent down to the practice squad, one or the other. Defensively, the Eagles played tremendous, causing four turnovers. Or yeah, four turnovers. Also had two team sacks. So if you started the Eagles defense, you were probably pleased again. Not too pleased with the garbage time points there at the end, but overall they had a good fantasy showing. So moving forward, what you really want to look for is look for more from the Eagles offense. I do think they're still getting out to a slow start. They ran the ball really well, and I think they're going to put it all together. Eventually, it is just week two. There's still no time to overreact. I think they get the ball to AJ Brown more. Think Devontae Smith is still a wide receiver one lock in your lineup, and that's coming from a wide receiver you took at the beginning of the fourth, end of the third round. So to pair him with another wide receiver that you probably already have, you are extremely excited to see what he can do for your team. On the other side of the ball, of course, Kirk Cousins is going to probably lose more games than he wins, but he's going to put up viable fantasy numbers and finish as a top 10 quarterback, most likely. Again, Justin Jefferson, lock him in your lineup. No need to talk about that. Alexander Madison is an interesting trade candidate. I think you trade for Alexander Madison, as a matter of fact. If you look here, over their next four games, the Minnesota Vikings play the Los Angeles Chargers, the Carolina Panthers, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chicago Bears. All very, very loose run defenses. I think that you can either trade for him really low right now or even just keep him if you have him on your roster. Your first two games are really tough against really, really great run defenses, and you're really unhappy with the way things shook out for him. But I think going forward, the next four games or so are really going to be crucial games for your fantasy team, and I think he has way better and way more productive games. All right, getting into the early games on Sunday. First off, we have Kansas City traveling to Jacksonville. The over/under is 51 points. You want pieces of this offense. Both offenses, aside from people named Kadarius Toney, I don't think he is a good enough wide receiver to fit in with the Kansas City Chiefs. And after last game, I don't see Patrick Mahomes targeting him that much, especially with Travis Kelsey coming back. He's going to be a target hog. Maybe Rasheed Rice, he earned some respect from Patrick Mahomes, especially with Travis Kelsey coming back. I don't see Kadarius Toney getting many opportunities this week. Maybe Rasheed Rice in a deeper league as a dart throw. Start Isaiah Pacheco. You probably don't have another option. He'll probably get some good goal line work, maybe. With Travis Kelsey coming back, who knows how different this offense looks. I do believe that they look better. I believe Patrick Mahomes plays better. I do think it's a Kansas City Chiefs win. Jacksonville Jaguars side of the ball, you're not starting Tank Bigsby until he shows you something else. He did get into the end zone last week, but he also had a fumble. Zay Jones, I like him. He had nearly 100 catches last year. I do think there's chemistry there with Trevor Lawrence. And I do think that Zay Jones will have a bigger opportunity this week than Calvin Ridley because of the coverage that Calvin Ridley is most likely going to see. Same with Evan Ingram. I do think he's a viable start. But other than that, I'm not starting any other Jacksonville Jaguar if I don't have to. That includes Christian Kirk. I'm not too pleased with the way opportunities are looking for him. I think it's going to be Zay Jones, Travis Etienne, Evan Ingram, and Calvin Ridley. And slowly but surely, Christian Kirk is going to be faded out of the equation. Then you have the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Buffalo to take on the Bills. The over under is 47. Some news here. Jacoby Myers doesn't look like he's going to see the field this week, still in concussion protocol. Devontae Adams was a full participant in practice today on Friday. So I do believe that Devontae Adams gets back, has a really big game. The Buffalo Bills looked beatable last week through the air. Wouldn't put Michael Meyer in your starting lineups yet. He's still behind Austin Hooper, and you're not starting Austin Hooper either. Maybe in 6 weeks or so, Michael Myers takes over that tight end room, but for the time being, you're not starting any Vegas tight ends. Hunter Renfro, I think, is a decent start this week with Jacoby Myers being out. I think that they're going to hyper target Devontae Adams, but the targets still need to be spread around more. I do think Josh Jacobs gets some targets, but I think it's going to be a Hunter Renfro show as well. I think he's a really good player, especially out of the slot. I think he's going to be open, especially with Tre'Davious White probably shadowing Devontae Adams. I think there's going to be a ton of slot opportunities for Hunter Renfrow. On the Buffalo side of the ball, if you want to take a shot with their defense, it's not a bad idea. Again, with Jimmy G behind center, you never know what you're going to get for the Raiders. But I think there's better pivot options, as I mentioned the other day, like the Detroit Lions, who we'll talk about next. However, for Buffalo, you're not pleased with the way Josh Allen has played. I think you're worried. If I'm a Josh Allen owner, I'm a little worried about what's going to happen with him. Like I mentioned, he's been near the top of the league in turnovers since he came into the league. Since 2018, he's led the league in turnovers with 84. This is a problem, and now that he's losing, it's being spotlighted. Mentioned it before, but where you drafted him, and as talented as Josh Allen is, he's stuck in your lineups. Do not sit him unless you somehow have a better option. And the only better option I see that could possibly be on your roster is someone like Trevor Lawrence. I think you're not going to sit Josh Allen, but maybe if you do, it could work in your favor. I wouldn't do it. James Cook, start him. He's going to have a probably a really big game. I think it's a get right game for him. He targeted quite a bit last week. He got the amount of touches he needed. It's just the Jets are such an outlier of a defense to go against, especially with 1 week of data. I think James Cook levels out this week. Stephon Diggs is in your lineup. I'm not sold on the Kincaid and Dawson Knox disparity yet. I'm not sold on Kincaid. I know a lot of people are high on him. He's a first round tight end. I don't think he's better than Dawson Knox yet. I don't think he's found his place in this offense. Now, that's not to say by week 10 that he doesn't find where he fits and he becomes a viable target for Josh Allen later on. But for right now, I don't start Kincaid. I start Dawson Knox and I start Gabe Davis. I think this is a really good game for Gabe Davis to have his boomer bust. I think this is one of his boom games on the year. Next, we're going Seattle. They travel to Detroit to take on the Lions. We talked about this a little bit the other day with the Detroit Lions defense. I think they're a sleeper defense to start. I don't think it's going to be a shootout. The over under is 47 and a half. I don't see if I'm betting on this game, I'm betting the under. I like the way Detroit looked last week, and I think that's part of the reason why the over under is so high because they were able to beat the Chiefs and put up. In this matchup, I think it's going to be a slower slugfest with the running games really taking part. So if you have Kenneth Walker, if you have Jameer Gibbs, and even David Montgomery, I think I'm excited for this game. I think the only pass catching option you start for Detroit is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he has a huge game. He's going to be hyper targeted and he's going to get a lot of catches. That's what he does. On the Seattle Seahawks side of the ball, I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is a good flyer. You're starting Lockett and you're starting DK no matter what. Gino is a good stream option this week. If he's available, pick him up and throw him in your lineup. I know last week he didn't play too well, but that was against what I think is an underrated Rams defense. Look for him to bounce back this week and get back to his consistent, regular game manager self, but he will have a couple touchdowns. Next, the LA Chargers travel to Tennessee to take on the Titans. The over-under is 45 and a half, with the Chargers being 2.5 point road favorites. Start any Chargers offense that you can, except Austin Eckler. It doesn't look like he's going to play this week. So if you have Joshua Kelly, if you were able to pick him up, that's someone that I'm putting in my lineup for this week only. Now, if Austin Eckler's ankle turns out to be worse than we could have imagined, that may change down the road. But for this week, Joshua Kelly is just a plug and play player. And if you're replacing Austin Eckler with him, I wouldn't be too excited. Gerald Everett, I think, is a good start this week, a streamer at tight end that could look to get into the end zone. Keenan Allen, of course, Mike Williams, of course. Quentin Johnson may have a really good game. They drafted him in the first round for a reason. He's going to be a red zone threat, I think. He's really big. He's a big physical wide receiver, and I think that he has a pretty decent game. If you're in a deeper league, I start Quentin Johnston. On the Tennessee Titans side of the ball, I don't like any of the options except Derrick Henry. DeAndre Hopkins may play, but if he does, he's going to be playing banged up. The Chargers let up a lot of passing yards and passing touchdowns to the Miami Dolphins last week, but that's just not the brand of football that the Titans are going to play. I think they're going to slow the pace down. I don't think the over under hits 45. And if it does, the Chargers are going to score 30 points of those. I don't think the Titans are built for a shootout with an offense like the Chargers. So I'm happy starting Derrick Henry. I think he's going to get a lot more work than he got last week. Traylon Burks might be a decent start, but I'm not starting him personally. If I have him, I don't think I have him in any leagues, but if I did, I wouldn't be starting Traylon Burks. Next, we got the Baltimore Ravens traveling to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. I think this is a bounce back game for all of the Bengals. I think Joe Burrow has a really big day. He may finish top five quarterback, top three quarterback on the week, even with Kirk Cousins showing this past weekend or this past Thursday. Lamar Jackson is in a different offense, and his Todd Monken offense, I'm not sold on it yet. I think they have him in a position to be a game manager and not a playmaker like he is used to being. So I'm not sold on this new offense just yet. There was a lot of talk about that going into the offseason. I had high hopes for it, but seeing week one, I'm just not there yet to be ready to just roll out all of the Ravens starters except Zay Flowers. I think he's the only option that I'm really willing to start this week. I think he has a pretty decent game. Mark Andrews, of course, if he plays, you're playing him. But if he doesn't, I'm not putting Isaiah Likely in there. T. Higgins and Jamar, you start him. Joe Burrow, start him. And Joe Mixon, start him. Next, we got the Green Bay Packers traveling to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. The over-under is 40.5. The Falcons are going to run the football. I think you start both Algier and Bijan. I think you look to find a replacement for Kyle Pitts, as I mentioned before. If you can trade for another wide receiver, do it ASAP, as long as that wide receiver is not named Drake London. And I wouldn't even trade Kyle Pitts for Garrett Wilson either. I don't even think you could, but even if you could, I wouldn't take it on either side of that trade. Drake London, I think he bounces back. It's not going to be a regular thing for him to get 0 targets. If anyone has a good chance in that offense to have a decent share of the passing game, it's going to be Drake London. He got a decent share of it with Ritter last year. Kyle Pitts still didn't. I trust Drake London. I don't trust Kyle Pitts. The Green Bay Packers side of the ball, I mentioned it the other day. I don't feel comfortable starting A.J. Dillon right now just based off of how he looked. He looked like he was running in mud. He looked slow. He looked sluggish. I'm not sure that you want to roll him out there. If you lost Aaron Jones, I think there's better viable running backs that you could find on the waivers this week. But I don't think that AJ Dillon is a viable, safe fantasy start. I think that he's not as good as people think he is, or I don't particularly view him as a good running back, a good NFL running back, and he's certainly not a good fantasy option. He will get volume, which is something that you can bank on, and maybe he gets into the end zone, which is something that will only save his day. I think touchdowns, he's going to be touchdown dependent. That's what you're looking at from AJ Dillon is a touchdown dependent game. Of course, Christian Watson is trending towards being out yet again. I think if he's out, Luke Musgrave is a great start. I think you even start Luke Musgrave over Kyle Pitts. Luke Musgrave has the potential to be a top five tight end on the week this week, on a week that just saw Hayden Hurst be a top five tight end against the Atlanta Falcons. So look for Luke Musgrave to have a great game against the Falcons, maybe a DFS start or maybe a pivot for you if you have a Kyle Pitts on your roster. Luke Musgrave is widely available on all platforms, so if you have the opportunity, go out and pick him up and throw him in your lineup. Especially even upgrade him more if Christian Watson does end up being out along with Romeo Dobbs. If Romeo Dobbs plays, you start him. I think he's a good flex play in deeper leagues. Probably not starting him in smaller, shallower leagues like a 10-team league. But anything beyond that, I think he's a good flex play. Next, we have the Chicago Bears traveling to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. Over under is 41 points. I think the Buccaneers mop the floor with the Bears personally. I think the Buccaneers are a lot better than people are giving Baker credit for. I think he's a better quarterback than he's given credit for. He has the weapons around him, and I think he puts up a pretty good day through the air. Might be a stream option. I do think there's better available quarterback options on the waiver, but if you're in a 16 team league and need a quarterback, maybe you're in a super flex league and need a quarterback, Baker Mayfield is not a bad start this week. On the opposite side, Justin Fields will probably have a bounce back game. The Buccaneers defense looked a lot better than I thought they were going to be going into the season. I still don't think they're a great defense. I think they're mid tier, middle of the pack defense, Justin Fields can have a pretty good day against them, I think, on the ground and through the air if they just unleash him. If they let him push the ball down the field to DJ Moore, if they can take Chase Claypool out and do something else with him. He looked awful. He's physically a freak. He just can't play football. I think Khalil Herbert is a guy you bench this week. I know he is first on the depth chart and he is going to get most of the work, but I like the Buccaneers run defense and I don't think that he's going to get the check down opportunities that he needs to be a viable fantasy start. In fact, personally in my league, I'm starting Rashid Shaheed over Khalil Herbert. And to round out the early morning game Sunday, the Indianapolis Colts travel to Houston to take on the Texans. The over-under is 39.5. I think this might be Anthony Richardson's breakout here I am game. I think he balls out completely if healthy. If he comes in 100% healthy, I know he took a knee shot or a bruised knee or whatever it was that he was holding him back and held him out of the end of the game last week. If he could come in 100% healthy and healed from that, I think this is a breakout opportunity for Anthony Richardson. I think he has a great game. On the other side of the ball, I'm not starting anyone except Nico Collins and Damian Pierce. I think those are the only two viable options for the Houston Texans right now. I don't think Dalton Schultz has even a viable start. Judging from how he looked last week and how CJ Stroud targeted him, I just don't think he's going to be a good fantasy tight end going forward. Again, the tight end landscape is so barren, it's a wasteland. You probably are going to start him anyways, and you can't be mad at yourself if you have to. He's probably better than a lot of tight ends on the waivers. I start Luke Musgrave over Dalton Schultz this week and going forward. And possibly even when Christian Watson comes back, I'm still going to start Musgrave over Schultz. I think Musgrave has the potential to be a top 10 tight end. Schultz does as well. He's just in an offense that doesn't target the tight end ever. Both side of the ball, start Michael Pittman. Zach Moss is poised for a really big game as well. That's really the only two options that I'm really wanting to start and really kind of comfortable with having in my lineup. There are a few other deep league dart throws that I'm interested in. Josh Downs, not interested in Isaiah McKenzie. Kylan Granson, maybe a decent dart throw at tight end, judging by the way he was played last week, how Anthony Richardson looked throwing to the tight ends. But I do think Anthony Richardson is the start to make this week at quarterback. So that runs out the early morning games. We'll be back tomorrow with the afternoon and primetime games, going over a little bit on what implications those hold. But to round out this episode, I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys a start. My start of the week. My start of the week is gonna be Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson is looking to be great fantasy quarterback. I know he had inconsistencies at Florida last year, but I think that with the ability and the athleticism that he has on the ground with his legs, catapults him above other streaming options and even other starting quarterbacks this week. I think his matchup is great. I think he has a great opportunity to have a top five quarterback performance this week and even a top five fantasy performance this week just because of his sheer rushing volume. I think he gets the goal line work. I think if they get inside the 10 or the 5, he's going to punch it in himself with his legs. And I think he even passes for a couple of touchdowns this week. He looked really, really good last week. The breakout is coming sooner than I expected, but I do expect Anthony Richardson to finally have that breakout game that I was looking forward to at the end of the season. I think that happens earlier than expected, and I think that happens this week. So, yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Again, look for it tomorrow as we go over the evening games and the primetime games. We'll round it out, and I'll give you my DFS picks for this weekend for the main slate of games. If you follow my DFS picks this week, you probably won a little bit of money. I didn't follow my own advice and I changed up some of the entrances. I wish I didn't because if I did, I probably would have won about $400 if I would have stuck with my own advice. Hopefully, you guys did. Hopefully, you guys won a little bit of money, and we'll come back with that same segment tomorrow. Thank you guys and have a great night and a great day.